Reading a book by Jane Roberts, who channels Seth, and the name of the book is The Nature of Personal Reality. Now, I'm going to start with the introduction by Jane Roberts. I'm proud to publish this book under my own name, though I don't fully understand the mechanics of its production or the nature of the personality I assume in delivering it. I had no conscious work to do on the book at all. I simply went into trance twice a week, spoke in a mediumistic capacity for Seth, or as Seth, and dictated the words to my husband, Robert Butts, who wrote them down. I consider the book mine in that I don't believe it could have been written without me and my particular abilities. On the other hand, I realize that far more is involved. I had to read the manuscript to find out what was in it, for example, and to that extent the book doesn't seem mine, but what does that mean? My ideal, briefly, is this. Our usual orientation is focused pretty exclusively in what we think of as the real world, but there are many realities. By shifting our consciousness, we can glimpse these alternate realities, and all of them are the appearance that reality takes under certain conditions. I don't believe that we can necessarily describe one in terms of another. For years I have been confused trying to define Seth in the usual true and false world of facts. There he's accepted as an independent spirit, a spirit guide by those with spiritualistic beliefs, or as some displaced portion of my own personality by the scientific community. I couldn't accept either ideal, at least not in undiluted form. If I said, look people, I don't think Seth is a spirit in the way you mean, then this was interpreted as an acknowledgement that Seth was only a portion of my personality. Some people thought that I was trying to put Seth down or deny them the aid of a super being when at last they thought they'd found one. Actually, I think that the selves we know in normal life are only the three-dimensional actualizations of other source selves from which we receive our energy and life. Their reality can't be contained in the framework of our creaturehood, though it is being constantly translated through our present individuality. The spirit guide designation may be a handy symbolic representation of this ideal, and I'm not saying that spirit guides do not exist. I am saying that the ideal deserves greater examination, for the spirit guide may represent something far different than we think. The ideal can also be limiting if it is always places revelatory knowledge outside of us and tries to make literal some extraordinary phenomena that may be beyond such interpretation. While I was trying to define Seth that way and questioning whether or not he was a spirit guide, I was closed off to some extent from his greater reality, which exists in terms of vast imaginative and creative power that is bigger than the world of facts and can't be contained in it. Seth's personality is quite observable in our sessions, for example, but the source of that personality isn't. For that matter, the origin of any personality is mysterious and not apparent in the objective world. My job is to enlarge the dimensions of that world and people's concepts of it. Seth's books may be the product of another dimensional aspect of my own consciousness, not focused in this reality, plus something else that is untranslatable in our terms. With Seth, a great psychic creation, more real than any fact, his existence may simply lie in a different order of events than the one we're used to. I'm not saying that we shouldn't apply what we learn to the ordinary world. Certainly I'm trying to do that. And Seth wrote this book to help people deal more effectively with their daily lives. I'm insisting that we must be very careful about making literal interpretations, lest we limit a multidimensional phenomena by tying it down to a three-dimensional fact system. Intuitively and emotionally, we often understand more than we intellectually realize. Trying to define revelatory knowledge, or a Seth, in terms of our limited ideas about human personality, is like trying to translate, say, a rose to the number 3, or trying to explain one in terms of the other. The funny thing is that a personality not focused in our reality can help people live in that world more effectively and joyfully by showing them that other realities also exist. In this book, Seth is saying that you can change your experience by altering your beliefs about yourself and physical existence. To me, the Seth material is no longer a continuing manuscript of fascinating theories to be carefully judged against reality. In a strange way, it has come alive. The concepts within it live. I experience them, and because of this, my personal reality has expanded. I've begun to glimpse the greater inner dimensions from which our usual lives emerge, and to familiarize myself with other alternate methods of perception that can be used not only to see other worlds, but help us deal more effectively with this one. While Seth was producing this book, my own life was immeasurably enriched in unforeseen ways. Frequent psychedelic-type experiences paralleled Seth's dictated material, and my own creative and psychic abilities developed into some entirely new areas. Just before Seth began, The Nature of Personal Reality, a Seth book, for instance, I found myself embarked on a new venture I call the Samurai development. Samurai refers to a family of consciousness who share certain overall characteristics. There is a language involved that isn't a language in usual terms. I think that it operates as a psychological and psychic framework that frees me from normal verbal reference, letting me express and communicate inner feelings and data that lie just beneath formalized word patterns. The Samurai development constantly expanded as Seth produced this book. Now various altered states of consciousness are involved. In one, I write samurai poetry, and in another, I translate what I have written. At different levels, I sing samurai songs, showing musical knowledge and accomplishment far beyond my normal talents or background. The songs can also be translated, but they communicate emotionally, whether or not the words are understood. In yet another state of consciousness, material is received that is supposed to represent remnants of ancient speaker manuscripts. These are also translated later. Seth defines the speakers as teachers, both physical and non-physical, who constantly interpret and communicate inner knowledge through the ages. My husband has also written Samurai, but I have to translate it for him. As Seth continues dictating The Nature of Personal Reality, I wrote a complete poetry manuscript, Dialogues of the Soul and the Mortal Self in Time, in which I worked out many of my own beliefs as per suggestions Seth was giving me in his book. This led to another group of poems, The Speakers. To me, this all means that there is a rich vein of creativity and knowledge available to each according to his abilities, just beneath the surface of usual consciousness. I believe that it is a part of our human heritage, accessible to some extent to any person who explores the inner dimensions of the mind. Dialogues of the Soul and Mortal Self in Time, The Speakers, and some samurai poetry are being combined into a book that will be published soon by Prentice Hall. I consider it a companion book to this one. It shows what was happening in my personal reality while Seth was writing his book on the subject, and reveals how the creative impetus splashes out into all areas of the personality. Seth often refers to the poems and to the experiences that initiated them. Many of those events occurred as I tried to understand the relationship between his world and mine, and the connection between inner and outer experience. But besides this, as Seth was dictating this present book, I also found myself suddenly writing a novel, The Education of Oversoul 7, which was produced more or less automatically. Oversoul 7, the main character, achieved his own kind of reality. I'd say mentally. Okay, 7, let's have the next chapter. And there it was, as quickly as I could write it down. Portions of the book also came in the dream state. I know that 7 and his teacher, Cypress, exist in certain terms, yet their reality can't be explained, either in the usual fact world. For example, the novel included many samurai poems and portions of speaker manuscripts. And when I sing samurai, I identify with Cypress, who is supposed to be a fictional character. I could also tune into 7 for help with personal challenges, I discovered. I love to go full blast ahead using my abilities as freely as possible. Yet quite as strongly, I'm often scandalized intellectually by the same events that intuitively intrigue me, or by the interpretations placed upon them. It does no good to pretend otherwise, and I think there's a good reason for this sometimes uneasy blend of intuition and intellect. I'm learning that both elements are important in my work and in Seth's, and perhaps my own refusal to accept pat answers leads me to search so intensely, and is responsible to some degree for my bringing in a Seth instead of a Mad Hatter. The samurai development, along with the experiences connected with the education of Oversoul 7 and the nature of personal reality, brought up so many questions that I was forced to seek a larger framework in which to understand what was happening. As a result, I'm working on a book called Aspect Psychology, which I hope will present a theory of personality large enough to contain man's psychic nature and activities. Seth refers to aspects, as we call it, in this present book, and it should be published sometime in 1975. In the meantime, all I can say is this: we live in a world of physical facts, but these spring from a deeper realm of creativity, and in a real sense, facts are fictions that spring alive in our experience. All facts. Seth, then, is as much a fact as I am or you are, and in a strange way, he straddles both worlds. I hope that aspects will also span the world of facts and the rich inner realities from which they come, for our experience includes each. The nature of personal reality not only enriched my creative life, but challenged my ideals and beliefs. I agree wholeheartedly with the concepts Seth presents here, while realizing that they run counter to many accepted religions, social and scientific dogmas. Certainly this book is an answer to all those who have written for help in applying Seth's ideas to ordinary living, and I am certain that it will assist many people in dealing with the varied events and problems of daily life. Seth's main idea is that we create our personal reality through our conscious beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world. Following this is the concept that the point of power is in the present, not in the past of this life or any other. He stresses the individual's capacity for conscious action and provides excellent exercises designed to show each person how to apply these theories to any life situation. The message is plain. We are not at the mercy of the subconscious or helpless before forces that we cannot understand. The conscious mind directs unconscious activity and has at its command all of the powers of the inner self. These are activated according to our ideals about reality. We are gods couched in creaturehood, Seth says, given the ability to form our experience as our thoughts and feelings become actualized. Seth first mentioned the nature of personal reality in session 608, April the 5th, 1972, only shortly after Rob and I had finished reading proofs for his previous book, Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul. He actually began dictation on April the 10th, 1972. But our personal reality was suddenly disturbed when we were caught in the flood caused by Tropical Storm Agnes. As a result, as you'll see in Rob's notes, further work on the book was delayed for some time. Seth often uses episodes from our lives as specific examples of larger issues, and our experiences with the flood served as a starting point for his discussion of personal beliefs and disasters. In several other instances, he also used our life situation as his source material, an intriguing turnabout. Since the early days of our session, which began in late 1963, Seth has consistently called me Rupert and Rob Joseph, saying that these names refer to the greater selves from which our present identities spring. He continues that practice in this book. As usual, Rob methodically records each session in his own version of shorthand and then types it. This is much easier and faster than taping each session, replaying it, and then typing. Periodically, Rob notes the passage of time to show how long it takes Seth to get through a particular passage. Seth himself dictates the words to be underlined or put in quotes or parentheses. Often he indicates the placement of colons and other punctuation as well. This book should help each reader understand the nature of private experience and use that knowledge to make daily living more creative and enjoyable. Jane Roberts, Elmira, New York, November the 6th, 1973. Preface by Seth. The manufacturer of personal reality. Jane first mentioned a couple of weeks ago that Seth, her trance personality, would start another book of his own soon. The ideal had just come to her after supper one night. We hadn't taken it very seriously since we'd finished proofreading Seth's first book, Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul, only last month. Certainly we weren't prepared for the fact that he was quite capable of launching another such project so quickly, nor did Jane have any conscious thoughts about subject matter or a title for any projected Seth book. I'm going to skip down through all this and begin with where Seth starts speaking again. Now, good evening. Good evening, Seth. We will call this evening's essay The Manufacture of Personal Reality. Experience is the product of the mind, the spirit, conscious thoughts and feelings, and unconscious thoughts and feelings. These together form the reality that you know. You are hardly at the mercy of a reality, therefore, that exists apart from yourself, or is thrust upon you. You are so intimately connected with the physical events composing your life experience that often you cannot distinguish between the seemingly material occurrences and the thoughts, expectations, and desires that gave them birth. If there are strongly negative characteristics present in your most intimate thoughts, If these actually form bars between you and a more full life, still you often look through the bars not seeing them. Until they are recognized, they are impediments. Even obstacles have a reason for being. If they are your own, then it is up to you to recognize them and discover the circumstances behind their existence. Your conscious thoughts can be great clues in uncovering such obstructions. You are not nearly as familiar with your own thoughts as you may imagine. They can escape from you like water through your fingers, carrying with them vital nutrients that spread across the landscape of your psyche, and all too often carrying sludge and mud that clog up the channels of experience and creativity. An examination of your conscious thoughts will tell you much about the state of your inner mind, your intentions and expectations, and will often lead you to a direct confrontation with challenges and problems. Your thoughts, studied, will let you see where you are going. They point clearly to the nature of physical events. What exists physically exists first in thought and feeling. There is no other rule. You have the conscious mind for a good reason. You are not at the mercy of unconscious drives unless you consciously acquiesce to them. Your present feelings and expectations can always be used to check your progress. If you do not like your experience, then you must change the nature of your conscious thoughts and expectations. You must alter the kind of messages that you are sending through your thoughts to your own body, to friends and associates. Each thought has a result in your terms. The same kind of thought, habitually repeated, will seem to have a more or less permanent effect. If you like the effect, then you seldom examine the thought. If you find yourself assailed by physical difficulties, however, you begin to wonder what is wrong. Sometimes you blame others, your own background, or a previous life, if you accept reincarnation. You may hold God or the devil responsible, or you may simply say, that is life, and accept the negative experience as a necessary portion of your lot. You may finally come to a half understanding of the nature of reality and wail, I believe that I have caused these ill effects, but I find myself unable to reverse them. If this is the case, then regardless of what you have told yourself thus far, you still do not believe that you are the creator of your own experience. As soon as you recognize this fact, you can begin at once to alter those conditions that cause you dismay or dissatisfaction. No one forces you to think in any particular manner. In the past, you may have learned to consider things pessimistically. You may believe that pessimism is more realistic than optimism. You may even suppose, and many do, that sorrow is ennobling, a sign of deep spiritualism, a mark of apartness, a necessary mental garb of saints and poets. Nothing could be further from the truth. All consciousness has within it the deep abiding impetus to use its abilities fully, to expand its capacities, to venture joyfully beyond the seeming barriers of its own experience. The very consciousness within the smallest molecules cries out against any ideas of limitation. They yearn toward new forms and experiences. Even atoms, then, constantly seek to join in new organizations of structure and meaning. They do this instinctively. Man has been endowed and has endowed himself with a conscious mind to direct the nature, shape, and form of his creations. All deep aspirations and unconscious motivations, all unspoken drives, rise up for the approval or disapproval of the conscious mind and await its direction. Only when it abdicates its function does it allow itself to become swayed by negative experience. Only when it refuses responsibility does it finally find itself in the seeming mercy of events over which it appears to have no control. Now you may take your break. Thank you. Jane was out of trance easily. "I've got a feeling," she said, that's the start of chapter 1. Her impression stemmed from the way Seth had called his material an essay tonight, which is something he hasn't done before. It developed that she was partially correct. Resume. Now, books on positive thinking alone, while sometimes beneficial, usually do not take into consideration the habitual nature of negative feelings, aggressions, or repressions. Often these are merely swept under the rug. The authors instead tell you to be positive, compassionate, strong, optimistic, filled with joy and enthusiasm, without telling you what to do to get out of the predicament you may be in, and without understanding the vicious circle that may seem to entrap you. Such books, again, while sometimes of value, do not explain how thoughts and emotion cause reality. They do not take into consideration the multidimensional aspects of the self, or the fact that ultimately each personality, while following definite general laws, must still find and follow his or her own way of adapting these to personal circumstances. If you are in poor health, you can remedy it. If your personal relationships are unsatisfactory, you can change them for the better. If you are in poverty, you can instead find yourself surrounded by abundance. Whether or not you realize it, you have pursued your present course with determination, using many resources for ends or reasons that at one time made sense to you. You may say, "Poor health makes no sense to me," or "A fractured relationship with my mate is hardly what I was after," or "I certainly have not been pursuing poverty after all my hard work." If you were born poor or born sick, then it certainly seems to you that these circumstances were thrust upon you. Yet they were not, and to some extent or another they can be changed for the better. This does not mean that effort is not required and determination. It does not mean that you are not powerless to change events and that each of you, regardless of your position, status, circumstances, or physical condition, is in control of your own personal experience. You see and feel what you expect to see and feel. The world as you know it is a picture of your expectations. The world as the race of man knows it is the materialization in mass of your individual expectations. As children come from your physical tissues, so in the world, your joint creation. I am writing this book to help each individual solve his or her own personal problems. I hope to do this by showing you exactly the way in which you form your own reality, by explaining the ways in which you can alter it to your advantage. The existence of so-called negative thoughts and feelings will not be glossed over, but neither will your ability to handle these, period, for they are quite under your control. There are methods of using these as springboards for creativity. At no time will you be told to repress them, to ignore them. You will be shown how to recognize those within your experience, to discover which of them has been allowed to run away with you, and how to manage those that seem to be beyond your control. The methods that I will outline demand concentration and effort. They will also challenge you and bring into your life expansion and alterations of consciousness of a most rewarding nature. I am not a physical personality. Basically, however, neither are you. Your experience now is physical. You are a creator translating your expectations into physical form. The world is meant to serve as a reference point. The exterior appearance is a replica of inner desire. You can change your personal world, You do change it without knowing it. You have only to use your ability consciously to examine the nature of your thoughts and feelings and project those with which you basically agree. They coalesce into the events with which you are so intimately familiar. I hope to teach you methods that will allow you to understand the nature of your own reality and to point a way that will let you change that reality in whatever way you choose. End of dictation. Okay, you're pretty tricky starting your book like that. Pleasantly. That is my way. I will give you the title and other pertinent information in a later session, and if you want it, an outline of the intent. I guess Jane would like to see that. Let us have this one as simple as possible. Give us a moment. Seth, still entranced, Jane took a long pause. Her eyes closed, she sat rocking back and forth with one foot upon the edge of the coffee table. This book will explain how personal reality is formed, with great stress laid upon the ways of changing unfavorable aspects of individual experience. It will hopefully avoid the Pollyanna attributes of many self-help books and tease the reader into an enthusiastic desire to understand the characteristics of reality, if only to solve his or her own problems. The methods given will be highly practical, workable, and within the ability of any person genuinely concerned with those problems inherent in the nature of human existence. The point will be made that all healings are the result of the acceptance of one basic fact, that matter is formed by those inner qualities that give it vitality, that structure follows expectation, that matter at any time can be completely changed by the activation of the creative faculties inherent in all consciousness. Please title what we have done this evening as my preface. The dictated portions, that is, I bid you a fond good evening. And so, now, that was just the preface by Seth, and now we come to the name of the book here, The Nature of Personal Reality. And in the next reading, I will start with Chapter 1, Where You Are and Where You and the World Meet.